Luke was a quiet cowboy who liked to stay away from noise and crowds. His ranch was a few miles outside the small western town, surrounded by open land, tall grass, and long wooden fences that he repaired by hand. People in town knew him as the shy cowboy who rarely spoke unless someone asked him a direct question. He wasn't unfriendly. He just didn't know how to speak much about himself. His world was simple. Wake up before sunrise, feed the horses, check the cattle, repair broken posts, and watch the sky turn golden every evening. This quiet life was enough for him, and he never imagined it would change. He didn't expect attention, nor did he think anyone would ever choose him for anything important. One morning, his friend Adam rode up to his ranch. Adam was the opposite of Luke, confident, loud, and always excited about new events happening around the valley. He told Luke about a cultural gathering happening in the mountain valley nearby. Different mountain communities would come down with food, crafts, and dances. People from the town were invited to meet them and make friendly connections. Luke didn't want to go. He felt nervous just thinking about being around so many strangers. But Adam kept insisting. He said Luke had been alone for too long and should experience something new. Luke didn't want to disappoint his friend, so after a long pause, he agreed. He kept his eyes low as they rode toward the valley, already wishing he had stayed home. When they reached the valley, it was full of life. Tents made of colorful cloth stood in long rows, smoke rose from cooking fires, and people from different mountain tribes walked proudly in their traditional clothes. Some were playing drums, others preparing food, and children ran around laughing. Luke felt even more nervous. This was much more than he expected. He kept close to Adam and looked around cautiously, hoping no one would notice him. But someone did. Across the valley stood Mara, a woman taller than anyone Luke had ever seen. She belonged to a mountain community known for their great height and strong build. She carried a large basket filled with handmade goods, walking with confidence as if every step she took belonged to the earth itself. Mara had been searching for someone with a calm heart, someone who understood patience and loyalty. People from her tribe were brave and loud. But Mara always believed that a peaceful partner would bring balance to her life. When she looked around the crowd that day, her eyes stopped on Luke. Luke didn't notice her at first. He was too busy trying to stay out of the way, watching people talk and laugh while he stood quietly near a wooden fence. But Mara's eyes didn't leave him. She found his quiet presence unusual and interesting. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He wasn't laughing too loudly, or showing off, or forcing conversations. He seemed comfortable being simple, and she admired that more than anything. Finally, Mara walked toward him. Luke didn't see her coming until she stood right in front of him, casting a long shadow on the ground. He looked up slowly, and the first thing he felt was shock. She was tall, strong, and confident. He felt like a child standing in front of an adult, even though they were close in age. He swallowed hard, unsure what to say or do. Mara smiled kindly. She didn't speak loudly, but her voice carried a natural strength. "You are different from the others," she said. Luke's heart almost stopped. He didn't know how to respond. He looked around, wondering if she was talking to someone else. But she wasn't. Her eyes were fixed on him. After a moment, Mara continued. Luke felt his cheeks warm. He tried to say thank you, but his voice got stuck. He simply nodded, hoping she wouldn't think he was rude. Mara seemed amused by his nervousness. She leaned slightly forward, still smiling gently. "I won't scare you," she said softly. "I just want to talk." Luke finally found his voice. I don't talk much," he confessed. "That's fine," Mara replied. "I talk enough for both of us." Her simple words made him blink in surprise. No one had ever spoken to him so directly, yet so kindly. Before he could gather his thoughts, Mara said something that completely froze him. "I'm starving for a companion." she said boldly. Someone honest, someone calm, someone like you. Luke stood completely still. His mind went blank. He had never been in such a situation before. Women from town rarely looked in his direction, and none had ever spoken with such confidence. He didn't know whether to step back or take a step forward. His heart was beating so fast that he could hear it in his ears. Mara didn't seem embarrassed by her own honesty. Her expression was open, sincere, as if she had simply spoken the truth without hesitation. Adam, who had been watching from a distance, nearly dropped his drink when he saw the scene. He had invited Luke to help him meet people, not to watch Luke be chosen by someone powerful and confident. He wanted to laugh, but he also knew Luke would panic if he teased him, so he decided to stay quiet and let the moment unfold. Mara gently placed her basket down and asked Luke about his life. Where did he live? What kind of animals did he raise? Did he enjoy the open land? Luke answered in short sentences, still overwhelmed by her sudden interest. But Mara listened carefully to every word, as if his simple life was the most fascinating thing she had ever heard about. She didn't push him for more details. She didn't judge his quiet nature. She simply enjoyed talking to him. As they stood together, people walking by noticed the unusual pair. Some whispered with surprise. Others smiled, sensing something genuine in the moment. But Luke barely noticed them. He was too confused by the feeling growing inside him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It was something new, a mix of curiosity and warmth. After a while, Mara said, "If you don't mind, I'd like to visit your ranch someday. I want to see the world you live in." Luke almost dropped the cup he was holding. No one had ever asked to visit him before, not even people from town. He didn't know what to say. Mara laughed softly at his stunned expression. "Think about it," she said. "I'm not in a hurry." The sun began to set, and the valley glowed with soft orange light. Mara picked up her basket again, but didn't walk away immediately. She looked at him with a thoughtful expression, as if she wanted him to understand something important. "I don't choose people because of how they look or how loud they are," she said. "I choose someone who feels right." Luke couldn't speak, but his silence didn't bother her. She nodded once, as if she had already gotten the answer she needed, and walked away slowly, giving him time to breathe. Luke watched her go, still frozen in place. He didn't know why someone like her would notice someone like him, but he couldn't deny the strange warmth in his chest. For the rest of the evening, he kept thinking about her words bold, honest, and impossible to forget. After returning from the valley gathering, Luke tried his best to forget the moment he had shared with Mara. He told himself it was nothing special, just a polite conversation. But every time he remembered her bold words, his face warmed, and he felt the same shock he had felt in the valley. He had never met someone who spoke so directly, especially to him. He spent the next morning working quietly on the ranch, brushing the horses and checking the fences, hoping the routine would calm his thoughts. But it didn't. Mara's smile kept appearing in his mind, and her voice echoed as if she were standing beside him. Adam, noticing his friend's unusual silence, rode to the ranch again. "You didn't say anything on the way home yesterday," he said, leaning against a wooden post. Luke didn't answer at first. He kept tightening a rope around a fence beam, trying to look busy. Adam chuckled. "Are you going to pretend nothing happened? That giant woman talked to you like she already picked you out of a whole crowd." Luke's ears turned red. He wished Adam wouldn't speak so loudly, but Adam was simply trying to lighten the mood. "I don't know what she wants," Luke finally said. "Maybe she was just being kind." Adam shook his head. "Luke, you don't understand. That kind of confidence doesn't come from just kindness. She saw something in you." Luke didn't reply. He wasn't used to people noticing him. His whole life, he blended into the background. He didn't try to stand out, and most people never paid attention to him beyond a polite greeting. The idea that someone like Mara would see him as important felt impossible. Later that week, Luke tried to keep to his routine, but life had other plans. On a quiet afternoon, while he was stacking hay in the barn, he heard footsteps approaching. At first, he thought it was Adam. But when he stepped out, he almost dropped the hay fork from his hand. Mara was standing near the entrance of his ranch, her tall figure, impossible to miss. She had walked all the way from the mountain road to reach him. Her long braided hair rested over her shoulder, and she carried a small woven bag. Luke froze again, just like the first time. Mara lifted a hand in greeting and smiled warmly. "I hope I'm not disturbing your work," she said. Her voice was steady and kind, not loud, but filled with natural strength. Luke tried to speak, but only a small sound escaped his mouth before he cleared his throat and tried again. No, you're not disturbing anything." He wished he sounded more confident. But Mara didn't seem bothered. "I wanted to see your ranch," she said gently. "You told me you raise horses. I love horses." Luke nodded quickly and motioned for her to follow him. He felt strangely nervous, but also a little proud. His ranch wasn't fancy, but he worked hard to keep it clean and functional. Mara walked beside him, observing everything with interest. She wasn't judging. She was genuinely curious. When they reached the horse enclosure, she stepped closer and softly touched the mane of a brown mare. "She's beautiful," Mara said. Luke smiled a little. "Her name is Dusty." Mara stroked Dusty's neck gently, and the horse leaned into her touch. "She likes you," Luke said. "Animals understand people's hearts." Mara turned to him with a thoughtful look. "Then she must sense that I mean no harm." Luke looked away, feeling shy again. They spent a while watching the horses. Mara asked him small questions about their habits, their food, and how long he had been taking care of them. Luke's answers grew longer as he relaxed. He enjoyed talking about his animals because it was the one thing he understood well. After some time, Mara offered him the woven bag she had brought. Inside were handmade cookies from her tribe. "They're sweet," she said. "I made them myself. People at home like them after a long day." Luke took the bag with both hands, surprised. No one had ever come to his ranch just to give him something. He thanked her softly, trying not to show how special the gesture felt to him. They sat on a wooden bench outside the barn, sharing the cookies. Mara talked about her life in the mountains, how her tribe worked together, how their homes were built on high cliffs, and how they believed in living simply and honestly. Luke listened silently, his eyes widening at some of her stories. Her world was so different from his flat, open land, yet her values of hard work, family, and loyalty felt familiar. When she finished speaking, Luke told her a bit about his life. He spoke slowly, choosing his words carefully. But Mara listened with patience. He told her about losing his parents early and how he had learned the ranch work from an older neighbor who treated him like a son. He talked about the quiet sunsets he loved, the calm nights, and how much he appreciated silence. Mara nodded, as if every word mattered. "You live with peace," she said. "Many people don't understand the value of that." Luke looked at her in surprise. No one had ever described his life that way. Most people just said he was too quiet or too shy. But Mara saw peace where others saw awkwardness. That made him feel seen in a way he never had before. A light breeze passed over them, carrying the warm smell of dry grass. Mara looked around and smiled. "Your ranch feels good, safe. It reminds me of the mountain air, only wider." Luke didn't know how to respond, so he just nodded again. But inside, something warm spread through him. He wasn't used to compliments, especially about his home. As the sun began to lower, Mara stood up and brushed off her hands. "I should go back before it gets dark," she said. Luke felt a strange pull in his chest, like he didn't want her to leave. But he didn't say anything. She noticed his silence and smiled gently. "I will visit again, if you want me to." Luke's heart jumped. He didn't want to sound desperate, but he also didn't want her to think he didn't care. "You can visit," he said quietly. "If you want to." Mara laughed softly. "I do want to." Then she turned and walked down the dusty path leading away from the ranch. Luke watched her until she disappeared behind a hill. Only when she was gone did he let out a long breath he didn't realize he had been holding. He sat back on the bench, the half-empty cookie bag still in his hand. He didn't understand what was happening to him, but he couldn't stop thinking about her warm smile and the calm way she listened. For the next few days, Mara began visiting more often. She helped him fix fences, carried heavy supplies without getting tired, and talked to him while he worked. Luke slowly became comfortable around her. Her presence didn't scare him anymore. Instead, it brought peace. Little by little, their two different worlds began to meet in the middle. Luke's life slowly changed in ways he never expected. Before meeting Mara, his days were quiet but lonely. Now each morning felt a little warmer. Each evening, a little less empty. Mara did not visit every single day, but she came often enough that Luke began to look forward to the sound of footsteps approaching his ranch. Every time he heard those steady steps on the dirt road, his heart beat faster, though he didn't fully understand why. Mara always arrived with a calm smile, sometimes carrying small gifts from her mountain tribe, dried fruit, carved wooden decorations, or freshly baked bread. Other times, she brought nothing except her company, which somehow felt like the most valuable thing she could offer. Luke never asked her to bring anything. He didn't even know how to ask for company. Yet she kept coming, and each visit made him feel more comfortable with her presence. One afternoon, the sun was high and warm. Luke was repairing a gate when Mara appeared, carrying a long wooden pole over her shoulder. "Your fence on the east side is damaged," she said. "A strong wind must have pushed it last night." Luke blinked. He hadn't noticed the damage yet. Mara had probably seen it from a distance while walking down the road. Without waiting for instructions, she walked to the broken section, lifted the heavy beam with one arm, and placed it back into its frame while Luke secured the nails. Working together felt easier than working alone. Luke didn't feel as tired, even though they did twice the work. He realized something simple but important. Mara never made him feel weak. She never mocked his shy nature or his quiet habits. She never asked him to be louder or different. She worked beside him naturally, as if she had always belonged there. As they worked, Mara spoke about her tribe's traditions. She told Luke how every person, no matter how strong, needed someone who balanced them. She explained that her people valued loyalty over appearance and kindness over loud words. Luke listened quietly. Her world sounded different, but also familiar in its simplicity. Mara paused and said softly, "I look for someone who brings calm, not noise. That is why I became interested in you." Those words made Luke glance down at his hands, surprised. No one had ever spoken to him like that. He had grown up feeling like his shyness was a weakness, but Mara spoke as if it was a gift. Later, they sat under the shade of a tree near the horse enclosure. The air was warm, and Dusty grazed nearby. Mara placed her hands on her knees and looked at the open land. "Your home is peaceful," she said. "I understand why you love it here." Luke nodded. "It's the only place I feel safe," he admitted. Mara turned to him with a soft smile. "I feel safe here too. I feel safe here. I feel safe here too." Luke felt something shift inside him. He had never imagined that someone like her, confident, strong, bold, would feel safe around him. It was almost unbelievable. They stayed under the tree for a long time, talking about small things. Luke told her about the different horses he had raised over the years, and Mara listened with patience. She asked questions gently, encouraging him to open up without pushing. Luke started talking more freely than usual. Even Adam had never heard him talk so comfortably. Mara's presence made him feel understood, even when he didn't say many words. As the weeks went by, their bond grew stronger. Mara continued visiting, sometimes helping him with heavy tasks, sometimes simply sitting quietly beside him while he worked. She joked that she liked how calm his ranch was because it stopped her mind from running too fast. Luke liked the quiet comfort of having someone beside him who didn't require endless conversation. The town began noticing their growing closeness. People saw Mara walking with Luke along the dirt road, or helping him at the market. Some smiled at the unusual pair, seeing the sincerity between them. Others whispered quietly, unsure how a shy cowboy and a bold mountain woman could ever belong together. But Luke didn't pay much attention to the whispers. He cared more about the peace he felt around Mara. One evening, Luke invited Mara to watch the sunset with him. It was something he usually did alone, sitting on a small hill that overlooked the grazing fields. Mara accepted happily. They sat together on the grass, watching the sky turn orange, pink, and purple. Luke noticed how the fading light made her features softer, almost gentle. She looked content, and her calm expression made his own heart feel warm. "This is the first time I've watched a sunset this way," Mara said quietly. Luke looked at her, confused. "How?" he asked. "Your mountains must have beautiful sunsets." "They do," she replied. "But I was always busy working, helping, running around. I never stopped long enough to enjoy it. You make me stop. You make me slow down." Her words touched Luke deeply. He never thought his quiet nature could influence someone so strong. A soft breeze moved through the fields. Mara leaned back slightly, resting her hands behind her. "Luke," she said, "I like spending time with you. More than I expected." Luke swallowed hard. He felt nervous but also strangely brave. I like your company too," he whispered. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence. The kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. Luke realized that Mara didn't see his quietness as a flaw. She saw it as something she needed, something that balanced her. But even as their bond grew, challenges started to appear. Some people from town began making comments behind Luke's back. They joked about how he was too quiet for someone like Mara, or how she was too bold to fit into his peaceful ranch life. Luke tried to ignore the comments, but they bothered him more than he admitted. Meanwhile, Mara faced pressure from some members of her tribe. They liked Luke, but questioned whether he would be able to understand mountain traditions or join their strong community. Mara always responded firmly, telling them that kindness was more important than strength. But their doubts still lingered, making her wonder how difficult it might be to combine their two worlds. One afternoon, Luke noticed Mara looking unusually quiet. She stood near the horses with her arms folded, watching the hills with a thoughtful expression. Luke approached her slowly. "Are you okay?" he asked. Mara turned to him, her eyes soft but slightly worried. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm making things complicated for you," she said. "Some people in your town talk in strange ways about us." Luke looked down at the dusty ground. He had heard the whispers too. "People talk all the time," he said. "They don't know anything about us." "Creeder." Mara nodded, but Luke could tell she wasn't fully convinced. He hesitated for a moment, before gently touching her hand. It was the first time he had done something so brave. Mara looked at him in surprise, her expression softening instantly. "You're not making things complicated," he said quietly. "You make things better." That simple sentence made Mara smile in a way he had never seen before, warm, full, and happy. She squeezed his hand gently before letting go. Their bond, once slow and uncertain, was now becoming real and strong. Luke wasn't just getting used to her presence, he was beginning to care for her deeply. And Mara wasn't just visiting out of curiosity, she was choosing him, day after day. Their worlds were different, but the connection between them kept growing stronger, and neither of them wanted to let go of it. As Luke and Mara grew closer, Life around them grew louder with opinions, whispers, doubts, and judgments that neither of them had asked for. Their friendship, or whatever it was, slowly becoming, brought light into their lives. But it also cast a shadow created by people who didn't understand them. Luke had always lived quietly, never attracting attention. Mara had always lived boldly, never hiding her truth. Now, the two different worlds, meeting in the middle, created noise that neither of them had expected. Luke first noticed it at the general store in town. He had gone to buy feed for his horses when he heard two men talking near the counter. They didn't know he was standing close enough to hear them. One of them laughed in a low voice and said, "Did you see that mountain woman walking with Luke again? He's too timid for someone like her." The second man replied, "She'll get bored of him soon. Quiet folks like him don't know how to keep up." Luke didn't say anything. He paid for the feed quietly and walked out, but his chest felt heavy. He wasn't angry. He rarely felt anger, but he felt a deep sadness. He wondered if he really wasn't enough for someone like Mara. He wondered if people were right. He tried to tell himself their opinions didn't matter, but the words followed him all the way back to his ranch. When Mara arrived later that day, she noticed something different about him immediately. He was quieter than usual, answering in shorter sentences, avoiding eye contact. She walked up to him and asked gently, "What's troubling you?" Luke shook his head. "It's nothing." But Mara didn't believe that. She knew him well enough to see when his silence was peaceful and when it was troubled. She took a step closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Luke, I can tell when something weighs on your heart." After a long pause, Luke finally spoke. He didn't mention names or repeat the exact words he had heard, but he told her that some people didn't think they made sense together. Mara listened quietly, frowning slightly as if someone had insulted her directly. When he finished, she said, "People talk because they don't understand. That's all." But Luke looked down again. "Maybe they're right," he whispered. "Maybe I'm not enough." Mara stepped in front of him, lowering herself slightly so she could look into his eyes without towering over him. "Luke," she said firmly, "don't let strangers decide your worth. You are more than their careless words." Luke tried to smile, but his heart still felt heavy. Later that week, Mara faced her own challenges. She returned to her tribe for a few days because of an important gathering. When she arrived, several elders asked her about the quiet cowboy she kept visiting. They didn't speak cruelly, but they asked questions that made Mara feel pressured. "Is he strong enough for tribal life?" one asked. "Will he understand your traditions?" asked another. "How will he join a world built on cooperation and physical work?" asked a third. Mara respected her elders deeply, but she grew uncomfortable as the questions continued. They weren't judging Luke's heart. They were judging what they assumed he couldn't do. Mara replied calmly each time, explaining that strength came in many forms, and kindness was just as valuable as physical power. Some elders nodded politely, but she could see doubt still in their eyes. That night, she lay awake in her mountain cabin, realizing for the first time how different her world was from Luke's. She believed they could bridge the gap, but she also knew that merging two different ways of life would not be easy. Yet when she closed her eyes, she remembered Luke's gentle smile, his quiet patience, and how safe she felt on his ranch. Those memories reminded her why she kept choosing him. When Mara returned to the valley, she walked straight to Luke's ranch without resting. Luke was repairing a broken wheel on an old wagon when she arrived. At the sight of her, his heart lifted a little, though he still carried the weight of his worries. Mara walked up to him and said, "Luke, we need to talk." Her voice wasn't angry. It was steady, serious. Luke set down his tools and wiped his hands on a cloth. Mara took a deep breath and explained everything that had happened in her tribe. The elders' questions, the pressure she felt, and her own fears about whether their worlds could truly come together. Luke listened silently, his eyes glued to the ground. When she finished, he whispered, Maybe this is too difficult. Mara's eyes widened with surprise. Do you truly believe that? I don't know, Luke said quietly. I don't want to make your life harder. Mara stepped closer, her voice softening. Luke looked up slowly. But people are judging us. They're judging you because of me. Mara smiled gently. Let them judge. Their voices don't change what I feel. Mara. But Luke still struggled. He didn't like conflict. He didn't like attention. And he hated the thought of being a burden to her. For the next few days, he became distant. Not because he wanted to avoid Mara, but because he was afraid of hurting her future. He worked quietly, kept to himself, and spoke less, even when she visited. Mara understood what was happening, but she didn't push him. She waited, knowing he needed time. One evening, after a long day of work, Luke was feeding the horses when he heard familiar footsteps. Mara approached him with a calm expression. Luke, she said softly, I know what you are thinking. You want to protect me from judgment. But I don't need protection from other people's opinions. I need you to stand with me. Luke swallowed hard. Mara continued. I chose you because your heart is gentle, because your presence brings peace, and because your quiet nature has more strength than loud voices. She stepped closer. But you must choose me too. Not silently. Not halfway. You must choose me fully. Luke held the horse's rope tightly. He had never been asked to speak boldly in his life. He had lived in silence for years, believing that avoiding conflict was the safest path. But now, for the first time, he realized something important. Silence could also hurt someone he cared about. He looked at Mara. She wasn't angry. She wasn't demanding. She was simply asking him to stand beside her with courage. And he realized that he wanted to. Deeply. The next morning, Luke walked into town. It was the first time he had gone on purpose to face people. Mara wasn't with him. He went alone because he knew he needed to do this for himself. He stopped at the general store where the same two men from before were talking. When they noticed him, they smirked, expecting him to walk away as usual. But Luke didn't walk away this time. He stood in front of them and said calmly, I don't care what you think of me. But don't speak about her like that. She's important to me. His voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It was steady, quiet, but firm. The two men stared in surprise, shocked that the shy cowboy had spoken so clearly. They muttered something under their breath and walked away, embarrassed. Luke didn't feel powerful or heroic. He simply felt relieved. For the first time, he had spoken for himself and for Mara. Later that afternoon, Mara arrived at his ranch. She saw the change in his expression before he even said a word. Luke took a deep breath. I choose you, he said softly, but firmly. Not quietly, not halfway. Mara's eyes softened, and a warm smile spread across her face. She stepped closer, and without speaking, she understood that something important had just happened. Luke wasn't the same shy cowboy she first met. He was still gentle, still quiet, but now he carried a stronger courage, one that grew from caring deeply for someone. Their challenges weren't over. People would still talk. Tribes would still question. Worlds would still be different. But now, they were standing side by side, not afraid of choosing each other. Their bond had reached a turning point, and both felt a new strength growing between them. A strength made of honesty, courage, and a shared desire to walk forward together, no matter what others said. The days after Luke openly chose Mara felt different in a quiet but powerful way. Something had settled inside him, a calm courage he didn't know he could ever carry. Mara felt the change too. When she visited the ranch now, Luke met her with a steady look instead of nervous eyes. He still spoke gently, still paused before answering questions, but his silence no longer came from fear. It came from thoughtfulness. Mara appreciated that deeply. She knew how rare it was for someone to change not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to grow for the sake of someone they cared about. Luke's small stand of courage slowly began spreading across the town. A few people noticed the way he walked with more purpose. Others noticed how Mara looked more relaxed when she stood beside him. The whispers did not disappear completely, but many of them turned softer, less sharp, as people realized that this quiet cowboy and bold mountain woman weren't just sharing time, they were building something solid. One afternoon, Adam came to visit Luke at the ranch. As usual, Adam was loud and full of dramatic stories, but today, he looked more serious than normal. "I saw what you did at the store," he said while leaning on a fence. Luke shrugged as if it were nothing. "I just spoke up." Adam laughed. "You say it like you lifted a feather. But for you, that was lifting a mountain. I'm proud of you, Luke." Luke's ears turned red at the compliment, but he appreciated his friend's words. Mara arrived later, carrying a small basket filled with herbs from her tribe. Luke helped her place it on a table inside the barn. The two of them talked for a while until Mara paused and looked around thoughtfully. "Luke," she said softly, "I want you to meet my family. Properly. Not just the elders who question things, but the people who raised me, worked with me, and supported me all my life." Luke's heart skipped a beat. Meeting her tribe felt like a big step, something serious. "Do you want me to?" he asked. Mara nodded. "Yes. And I want them to meet the person I chose." They planned the visit for a cool morning when the sky was clear. Luke cleaned his boots twice, combed his hair 3 times, and still felt nervous. He didn't know what the mountain tribe expected, and he feared disappointing them. But when they reached the mountain path together, Mara placed her hand on his arm and said calmly, "Just be yourself. That is enough." The climb to her tribe's home was long and steep, but the view was incredible. Tall trees lined the path, and the echo of distant waterfalls filled the air. When they reached the mountain village, dozens of tall wooden houses stood proudly between rocky slopes. People gathered around, surprised to see Mara returning with someone by her side. Mara introduced Luke to her parents first. Her mother was tall like Mara, but had a softer expression. And her father carried the firm, steady posture of someone who had worked hard all his life. They looked at Luke with curiosity, but not with judgment. Mara spoke about Luke's kindness, his patience, and the calm strength he carried. Her parents listened carefully. When her father extended his hand, Luke felt a wave of relief. "Welcome," the man said in a deep voice. "Any friend of Mara is welcome here." Mara's mother smiled gently and added, "We're happy she brought someone who understands peace." The rest of the tribe slowly approached. Some people asked Luke questions about his ranch, his animals, and his land. Others simply observed him quietly. Luke answered politely, never trying to pretend he was something he wasn't. When someone asked if he could help carry a heavy wooden log, Luke stepped forward without hesitation. He wasn't as strong as the mountain people, but he tried with all his heart. Mara walked beside him, helping with most of the weight. Together, they carried it, without stopping. That simple moment working side by side earned them respect. People from her tribe whispered with approval. They saw that Luke wasn't trying to compete with their strength. Instead, he offered effort, loyalty, and sincerity. Later that evening, Mara guided him to a high cliff, where the entire valley below glowed under the sunset. "This is where I come when I need peace," she said. Luke looked around in awe. The view was breathtaking. "Now you've seen both my world and yours," Mara said gently. "Do they feel too far apart?" Luke shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "They feel connected, because you're in both." Mara smiled and looked away for a moment, touched by his words. The cool wind brushed across their faces, carrying the scent of pine trees and fresh earth. Luke felt a calm certainty growing inside him. He wanted to stand by her, not only in quiet moments but also in challenges, traditions, and future decisions. When they returned to the ranch the next day, people from town watched them with more understanding. It wasn't sudden acceptance, but the beginning of it. Some of the townsfolk nodded politely. A few even greeted Mara with friendly smiles. Things were changing slowly, but they were changing in the right direction. Weeks passed, and the bond between Luke and Mara strengthened naturally. They shared meals on the ranch, walked through the fields together, and sometimes traveled to the market as a pair. Luke still spoke softly, but now he looked more confident. Mara still carried her bold spirit, but now her confidence felt warmer, grounded by Luke's presence. One evening, while they were watching the horses grazing, Mara turned to him and said, "Luke, I don't want to keep walking between our worlds, as if they are separate." Luke looked at her with curiosity. "What do you mean?" She hesitated for a moment, then continued, "I want us to build a life together. Not just in your ranch or my mountains, but together, as one." Luke felt his breath catch. He had imagined a future with her many times but never thought she would speak so openly about it. He lowered his gaze for a moment, thinking deeply. Then he looked up and said softly, "I want that too." They spent the next few days discussing what that future might look like, how they could combine their traditions, how their families could support them, and how they could respect both cultures while building something new. They didn't plan anything extravagant. They just promised to choose each other every day. Word spread in both communities. Some people were surprised, some curious, and some genuinely happy. Mara's tribe offered their blessings. Luke's town slowly accepted the idea, realizing how genuine their bond was. Finally, on a clear afternoon with the sky wide and blue, both communities gathered in the valley, the same valley where Luke and Mara had first met. People from the mountain tribe stood beside townsfolk, creating an unusual but beautiful crowd. Luke wore simple clothes, as he always did, and Mara wore a traditional woven cloth from her tribe. They stood side by side, holding hands. Someone from the mountain tribe spoke about the importance of honesty and loyalty. Someone from the town spoke about peace and partnership. When it was Luke's turn to speak, he took a slow breath. His voice was gentle, but strong enough for everyone to hear. "I never thought someone would choose me," he said. "But Mara did. And I choose her too, fully, honestly, and with all the calm strength I have." Mara squeezed his hand, her eyes bright with emotion. "And I choose Luke," she said. "Not because he is loud, not because he tries to impress me, but because he is steady, kind, and true." The valley was silent for a moment, filled with respect. Then people from both sides applauded softly. It wasn't a loud celebration, but a heartfelt one. That day marked the beginning of their shared life. Luke remained the gentle cowboy he always was, and Mara continued to be the strong mountain woman who spoke with bold honesty. Together, they built a home where peace and courage lived side by side. Their love wasn't loud, perfect, or dramatic.